This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hey knockers, I'm Madison.
And I'm Hannah.
And you are listening to Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
Yes. Today we are doing a new episode. We're still remote. Still things are going on. But this is about a lady named Katherine Knight. If we're ready to just get into it, I think we should just get right into it.
Yeah, sounds good. We are diversifying. We are getting into female perpetrators.
The ladies. Yeah, and it's like quite the bang. I mean, we just did Karla Homolka and like she was like, you know, quite the evil person. This one it's another doozy. This one, there's a lot of things in this episode that are, if you have issues listening to certain things, if you have like one thing where you're like, I don't know if I like listening to that. Like for me, I don't like listening to like children being like extra tortured and neglected and like, you know, I don't like listening to like a lot of bad things happening to kids.
Fair.
This one has a lot of things, and I don't want to say what they all are because it's going to kind of ruin the ending. But just if you have any sensitivities, this might not be for you. It's like, it is just like one murder. It's one incident, but like there is so much to the story. There's a lot of different topics that we'll cover. Like domestic abuse is a huge thing in this story. Both domestic abuse against women and domestic abuse against men. So just domestic abuse all around. And like
that's interesting.
I like a shocking amount of domestic abuse against men, which is I
feel like we don't hear about that too often.
Yeah, definitely, it's an under talked about thing. So it's, you know, it's interesting and it's horrible. Yeah, like a lot of bad things happen. There's a lot of violence in it, and like there's one specific thing I'm not going to say it because it's going to ruin the ending.
Okay, you're really hyping it up.
Just trust me. Like, don't listen if you've got a like sensitive stomach or something, you know?
Yeah. If you're here, you probably want to hear this.
Quite a bit of sexual abuse. I'll just say that in case that's your thing.
We hate that.
But yeah, pretty much every case has it. So it's, you know, covered a lot here.
Yeah.
So today we're going to Australia. We've not been there yet on our show. So there's that. And yeah, I'm just going to get right into it.
Shout out Miles.
Yeah.
My friend who lives in Australia.
Yeah. Well, watch out for Katherine Knight. She's still alive. I won't say anything further about that. But anyway, so Katherine Knight, she was born on October 24th, 1955. And she was born just a half an hour after her fraternal twin sister, Joy. She was born to parents Barbara and Ken Knight and into an already very complicated and tumultuous family situation. So her mother, Barbara, had originally been married to a man named Jack Rowan, and they lived together in a small town called Aberdeen, New South Wales, Hunter Valley, Australia. And this is a very small rural town about 3 hours north of Sydney, for anybody looking for a reference. And this was a very small town, under 2,000 people, very limited working options at the time. Essentially, you could have been, if you owned a farm, you could be a farmer. And other than farmers, there were miners and people who worked in the slaughterhouse. And just for reference, they call, I don't know if it's an Australian thing, but it is a French word, but they call slaughterhouses abattoirs a lot in this world. I'm going to just call it a slaughterhouse because that's what it's called here. And so Barbara's husband, Jack, worked at the slaughterhouse. This seems like the last place I would ever want to work is a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
It sounds like what nightmares are made of.
No, thank you.
It was a huge thing. And it seemed like it was the type of place where like they were always looking for workers.
And it was no one wants to work there.
Yeah. And it was like it was the last option. Like
Yeah.
If you couldn't be a farmer and then you couldn't be a miner, you're going to work at the slaughterhouse. So that's where Jack worked. And Barbara and Jack were high school sweethearts. But shortly after high school and after they actually got married, their marriage became essentially transactional at best. It was not good. It was not fun for anybody. And they had 4 sons. And during this time, it was very commonplace in this town, at least, and I'm sure in a lot of places, for women to just really accept their lot in life, just grit and bear it through their shitty relationships. And it was normal to just try to be grateful to have a marriage and have a family, and to so accept being treated poorly and even in a lot of cases abusively. And to be fair, not fair, but like just to say, like, the men's situations didn't seem great either. I mean, you're a miner or a slaughterhouse employee, so it's just your options are basically hard labor or hard labor. Like hard labor,
not ideal all around.
Hard, dangerous labor or hard, disgusting labor.
Yeah.
So it's like didn't seem like a great situation for anybody. And so the whole culture just seemed to be a little bit rife for abuse and unhappiness and a lot of alcoholism. And I don't want to like just shit all over this because like I don't know, for all I know, like it was like a good life for a lot of people. But from what I read, like it just didn't seem fun in any way. But also I was reading about a pretty gruesome murder, so maybe it's painted that way for that reason. I don't know. So that's where they're living. And so one night there was a like get together at a local bar, and it was all the slaughterhouse guys and their wives. And Barbara ended up finding an opportunity in a man named Ken Knight. Ken, yeah, he was one of the slaughterhouse workers.
So I love all the slaughterhouse workers and their wives. Like,
yeah,
sounds like a great time.
Yeah, like after work, I guess you like hose yourself off and go to the bar.
Gross.
Yeah, and like it sounds horrible. And like, you know, people work at slaughterhouses and like I eat meat, so like I don't want to like shit all over people who work at slaughterhouses. Like that is
I know people who hunt and raise animals for food for like, you know, farm life, and people don't seem to mind it, but it still sounds scary.
Yeah, I don't like blood. I don't know.
Me neither.
Or like I don't even like chopping up meat, but anyway, that's a thing for I don't know, maybe another
We're
conversation.
Such babies.
Yeah. Hopefully there's no vegans listening because they'll get upset.
Yeah.
I tried to be vegan for like a couple months one time, and like I started watching all these YouTube videos of vegans, and there's still like this one girl who I watch all of her videos because I just like the way she talks, and like she's like a really hardcore vegan, so like I always am like, fuck, what if she watches? But like she's gonna know me.
She's gonna know you're not vegan,
and she like would definitely like be like, that's horrible, like. But I just think she has like a really like nice like Midwestern voice, and I just like listening to her talk. So I like watch all her vegan videos.
That's fine.
It's like a random guilty pleasure video that I watch. Anyway, that's a little about me. So anyway, they're at this bar. Barbara meets Ken Knight. Ken starts flirting with Barbara and like obviously being interested in her, knowing that she's married to his coworker and what's his name? Jack is kind of doesn't seem to really notice. Everyone's drunk. And so soon after this situation, Barbara and Ken begin an affair. What are you looking at?
Sorry, my dog's being really cute. I'm not normally in a room with all my dogs recording, and one of them was just Taro was just looking at me really cutely. And I was just remembering something cute he did. Okay.
All right. We got the giggles. So yeah, they started an affair. And this was great for Barbara because she was finally experiencing a relationship with a man who seemed to actually like her. Her husband did not seem to actually like her at all, unfortunately.
So I'm kind of not surprised she cheated, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this sounds like it's all from kind of her perspective, but it sounded like he like was at minimum like resentful of her and like mean to her, at worst abusive.
It's so shitty.
Yeah. And like, I don't know that she was like, you know, just like great
Right.
all around. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure it's, you know, it takes two. Whatever.
Later, we find out like she's, you know, I think it's more because probably because of how she's been treated her whole life, but like she's kind of a piece of shit too. But just wait, like things get much worse for Barbara.
Okay.
So yeah, and she's like really happy to be with Ken because also like her husband just like basically uses her for sex and then treats her like garbage the rest of the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And so Ken seems to be like a nice guy who's like they're having like real intimacy.
Right.
That's
like pretty much anyone would seem nice after that.
Yeah. So then soon her family found out about the affair and they were not happy. And it's interesting because what I would have assumed is true, like most infidelities going on in this area in this time were just kept very hush hush. Even if people knew about them, they were allowed to run their course. The marriage maintained its facade, which just seems like a hellish environment to me. But
yeah, that seems not ideal.
Yeah, people just live like that, I guess, or that seemed to be like a common thing of the past, according to TV.
Right, because I think divorce can be really frowned upon. So
yes, this was definitely a time where like divorce was super frowned upon. I mean, it's only kind of recently that divorce has become like an acceptable
normal
thing. And so I think that a lot of like pre-divorce being acceptable, that's just kind of how things were.
Which is so fucked up.
And I mean, it is, and I agree. I'm like, to me, like an infidelity in a marriage is like one of the only things I like could not forgive you for. Like,
well, or just like being abused, and it's like you could just stay with your shitty husband but cheat on him, and that's okay, but divorcing is not okay.
It's true. It's just like I think we're living in like one of the only times and places in history where like the expectation of like loyalty in a like marriage or relationship is like generally followed through on. Like that's just like in all of time and history and geography, that's like was not like that. And that's probably a hard pill to swallow for me because like I don't like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know how other people feel about that, but
monogamy or not.
Yeah. An interesting topic. But anyway, so Jack was not happy with this at all. He did not want to be one of those people who just like allowed it to happen. He got super pissed. He beat the shit out of Barbara, kicked her out of the house. Yeah. And like, I think he like burned her clothes or like no, he didn't burn her clothes. He just like threw them all out of the house. Like he kicked up a huge fit. And so she was left with nowhere to go and she moved in with Ken.
Oh, well.
So she did have somewhere to go. It was at Ken's house.
I hope his house was better.
It must have been smaller because it was like he was a bachelor and like they lived in a place with 4 kids. I don't know. But it was a place. I can't assume it would have been very nice.
I just more mean like he was nicer to her. Like she had a better life.
Yeah, she did.
Oh, well, there you go.
For now.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah. It does not go well for Barbara, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm expecting a happy ending right now.
Don't expect anything good to happen to anybody in this story. I'll just say that. It just is shit upon shit, and it just is a downhill.
Okay.
Oh, I never rated this, by the way. This is a hard one to rate because it's like, it's only one murder. I'm not scared of it. I would never be the victim of this, but
yeah, it's less scary for us in that case.
Yeah, it's less scary, but it's like, it's gnarly. I'm going to just say 5.
Okay.
Because like, it's not scary, but it's like, basically like the people who had to go through this crime scene like are probably still in therapy. I'll just say that.
Yeah. The next episode I'm doing, same.
Yeah. It's like that.
Yeah.
So I'll say 5 and then we can discuss later.
A respectable 5.
A respectable 5. So anyway, Jack, so they had the 4 sons. So immediately when Barbara moved out in with Ken, he sent the younger two sons to live with an aunt in Sydney, which was probably fucking great for them.
Yeah. Got out of that slaughterhouse town.
Yeah. And then the two older sons stayed with him. And whenever the three of them ran into Barbara in town, they called her horrible names and like didn't want anything to do with her. And Barbara had also been estranged from her own family. I'm not sure if it was over this affair or if it was for something else, but I assume it was over the affair.
Wow, Carla's family forgives her for murdering their daughter. And
yeah,
this family,
this
lady, had an affair.
She is allotted, like, nobody gives this woman a break. Nobody in her life. And I do think that, like, my research on this, I think it's probably a difficult case to research and get like really truthful information, mostly because like all of the information must have come from all of these people in the story, and like everybody has their own gripe, I'm sure, and like their own, there's a lot of conflicting accounts.
Yeah.
So I did do my best to try to pick like what seemed the most plausible. But I think a lot of these people in the story,
everybody wants to give their own side, but they're all like, I mean,
and a lot of them I think are like, some of them are in jail, some of them are dead. I don't know, like from Barbara and Jack and Ken, like who got to speak about all of this, because it sounds like it's all just like totally directed at Barbara, like, and she's the victim and like Ken's the bad guy. But so anyway, take this how you will. But this is like the general consensus.
Right.
So after all this, she and Ken decided that they needed to move. So they moved to a town called Moray. I believe it's Moree. And some of Ken's family lived there, so that's why they picked it. And it was another town that had mining and slaughterhouses.
Great.
Yeah, I guess Australia has a lot of like
mines and slaughterhouses.
Yeah, well, they have a lot of like beef and like farming, like specifically like cows and pigs and stuff. So like that's a huge industry in a lot of these rural areas, or at least it was at the time. So yeah, they moved in together, and within 1 week, Barbara was able to divorce Jack and marry Ken. So she just went from one shitty abusive relationship to another shitty abusive relationship, as we will learn, because Barbara does find out, and I'm sure she probably knew that Ken was like definitely a drinker, but once they got married and started having kids, it became very apparent that Ken was a raging alcoholic and like a super shitty guy.
Great.
So Barbara had two more sons, so now she has 6 sons in total.
It's too many.
Yeah, and Ken just wanted to have sex with Barbara all the time, constantly, up to 10 times a day.
Wow.
And so pretty much her entire marriage was just Barbara being beaten and raped up to 10 times a day and treated like shit all the time. And I'm saying that she was raped 10 times a day because he made her have sex with him all the time, and like she didn't want it, clearly.
That's
so like to me, that is her being raped.
100%.
And most of this was done just in front of their children. No shielding from this.
That's gonna make sure that they develop really well then.
Yeah, so that's just gonna fuck them right up, and that it did. Then in 1955, Barbara discovered she was pregnant yet again, and this time it was with twins. And all of her previous pregnancies, she was, really excited, but at this point in her life, Ken pretty much just drank away all of their money and taught the kids to treat Barbara horribly. So
shitty.
Yeah, so she was like, oh, fuck. And she, at this point, also assumed that she would have 2 more boys, since to this point she'd only had boys. But it was to Barbara's delight when on October 24th, 1955, she gave birth to a set of twin girls. Their names were Joy and Catherine. Now, Joy and Catherine grew up very close. They were very close to each other. But Joy very quickly started to become a tomboy and just really joined in with all the boys in the family and was treated like one of the boys. She And Catherine as well learned to be horrible to their mother, like the guys. That was like the culture of the home, like
So fucked.
just treat Barbara like shit, which sounds just horrible. And Catherine, on the other hand, was very feminine. Despite Ken's super shittiness, he really had an interesting and like kind of special relationship with Catherine. He really liked having like a little girly girl. Catherine was like super into like dolls and dresses and like little girl things. And I think what Ken really liked is that like Catherine treated her dad like he was a god, like he could do no wrong. And like,
I'm sure he loved that.
Yeah, he clearly loved that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And he found her to be like a really nice little escape from the rest of his life, which was like completely male dominated. And I think he also liked like a relationship with a girl who wasn't his wife, because he definitely felt like Barbara like judged him for his drinking and was like kind of competitive with him, and it's like, dude, like maybe you have a drinking problem, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you know, you'd think that this would like kind of soften him up a little bit. Like a lot of the time when like men have like daughters, it's like kind of softens them, but he just continued being shitty and raping and beating and and all that. So that it was something nice in the chaos of their home, but it was still chaos and horrible.
Yeah.
So Ken was a very harsh disciplinarian towards all of his children, including Catherine. He beat them often and harshly. And as I said, he was very abusive to Barbara in front of the children. And he like it's implied too, like he stripped her of all of her dignity in front of the children by beating and raping her. So that led the children to like have no respect for Barbara. So like when
that's so fucked.
So when she's home with them all day, like she has no authority over them, and they're all like super rambunctious and like presumably have like huge behavioral issues due to the household that they're living in. So it's just, you know, more chaos. But they all grew up thinking like this is a normal family. And it's very clear too that like they were like their family was definitely not the norm. Like their family was like specifically shitty, and like Ken was especially shitty to his wife. Like everyone else was not like that. And
I would hope not.
Yeah. And it was said too that Catherine, though she was beaten the same as her siblings, she was the best at adapting her behavior to the beatings. Like the kids, all the other kids were repeatedly beaten for the same thing over and over. It was said that she was never beaten for the same thing twice. She was a very like stubborn girl who like stood up for herself and stuff, and like, you know, would get in trouble for things for sure. But she knew like once she did something once, she wouldn't do it again. Which I'm sure she was being least of everybody.
Okay.
Which isn't interesting.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting in families where like some kids are abused more than others.
Yeah.
Because looking at it from the outside, you would think everybody would be abused equally, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people, especially like, I don't know, maybe people who like don't have kids or like don't remember so much growing up as a family, but like it's so much more likely as a child that you will be treated differently than your siblings because your personalities are different. Like parents can't help getting along better with one kid than another, or like, you know, having certain things in common with one kid and not the other or whatever.
Right.
And then I think especially once you get into like abusive, I mean, and some people are like, you're abusive because you're an alcoholic and because you're like a shitty person. Like, I think you're more likely to just beat everyone because you're just a nasty person.
If you're just angry. But then I guess sometimes if it's like you're specifically abusive to males or females, both.
Or like one kid figures out how to like, is like learns your behavior and figures out how to like navigate that, you know, like how to like stay out of the way or how to, you know, do what the person wants done. I don't know, but like there's so many like people can adapt to situations in such interesting ways.
Yeah.
that I think it makes so much more sense that like people get treated unevenly than they do evenly.
Yeah.
It's just not how life works, you know. Nothing is equal, nothing is fair.
That's optimistic.
Well, it's true, right? Like, you know, when we were growing up, especially like with one of my grandmothers was like, so she's like, everything has to be fair. Everything for each kid has to get the same amount of this and same this and same that. But I think it's like, you want to teach kids young that like life is not fair. You should not expect it. Like just, you can't expect things to be fair. If you have that expectation from when you're young, then it's not like terrible when you learn that later.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because like there's no way to make things fair. You can't.
Right.
I don't know. That's my opinion. Anyway, in 1959, when the twins were 4 years old, Jack, Barbara's ex-husband, died. So the two older boys that were living with him were sent to join the Knight household.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So unfortunately for Barbara, they joined right in on the culture of the home. The boys
How is
already
she taking care of this many children?
I have no clue. Well, I think they just kind of ran wild. And like, that's the type of thing where, you know, you're living in Australia, so it's like warm. So they're just outside. Like, there's lots of instances where these kids were like just beating the shit out of each other. And other kids were just like, fuck. Like,
that doesn't seem normal.
No, they're very clearly not a normal family at all. And they're not seen as normal by anybody else.
Got it.
And you'll see in a little bit, I've got, you'll see, I'll talk a little bit about it. Yeah. And so those two boys from her previous marriage, like they already hated her for abandoning their father and cheating on him and everything. So like, it was like a pretty easy sell to be like, yo, we treat this woman like trash, like join in. And they were like, yeah, cool. We're down.
Yeah.
And so as they're getting older, like Katherine is the girlier one. And so like she kind of probably like gets along with her mother the best, but she still has no respect for her like the rest of that family, because she like respects the shit out of her dad too. And Katherine started like, she was the only one to kind of enjoy some of like the domestic type activities like cooking and sewing and stuff like that. And so she kind of like took over from her mother in a lot of these realms.
Okay.
And as the kids got older, Barbara started getting more and more depressed and like feeling really resentful. And
wonder why.
Yeah, like at this point, her life is just completely void of joy. She has zero emotional connection to any of her children. So like must be just a giant disappointment to somebody who's had 8 children.
Yeah.
So she's just like super bitter, and she very specifically at this point just hates men. Not surprising.
I would too.
Yeah, so would I. All of her past relationships were just abusive, and she just basically spent her entire life as a punching bag and a rape victim to whatever man that she was with. So, and because Katherine spent more time in the home, Barbara, like she kind of treated both of her daughters like this, but more so Katherine, just because of where her interests were and like the time that she spent with Barbara. But she just really treated Katherine like a little confidant, but like in a really inappropriate way.
Right.
Where she would just tell Katherine like really horrible and very explicit stories about all of her abusive sexual experiences that she'd endured. And like, she was really graphic about it, and like, just like stuff that you should not be sharing with a child, like an impressionable child.
Yeah.
And she just spilled like all of the family secrets with Katherine. And because they lived like a really isolated life, Katherine was like, oh, this is a mother-daughter relationship. Like moms talk like this to their daughters. Not the case. Poor Katherine.
Right.
And so another layer onto this. So rural Australia, 50s and 60s, it was a very racist culture toward the indigenous people of the region.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I feel like it's still like not great today, but like back then it was like rough. They just were hated, and it was very explicit, very in your face. And Katherine shared with both of her daughters that her great grandmother was an Indigenous woman. And she like used that to put this just terrible fear into them that if anybody found out about this, like this was a secret. And she didn't look like she had any like Indigenous heritage. But she was like, basically, if anybody finds out about this, you'll be treated like garbage. Everyone will hate you and you'll be shunned from everything. And so they were terrified of this. And that was just another thing that she put on her daughters.
So fucked.
Yeah, that's just like a whole bunch of like, Jesus Christ. And so then you had the boys. And so they were all being, taught how to be a boy or a man or whatever by their father, who treated all women like they were objects and merely to be used for sexual gratification. And so the boys, and specifically the older ones who were from the previous marriage, they, started coming into themselves and like wanting to explore their sexuality, whenever. And they started making all these attempts at the girls in the area. But this is kind of like a part of the broader culture, there was this like known like protection over the girls in the area where like their fathers knew that this was how the boys were. So they were very overprotective of their daughters. It was also like the norm definitely to not have sex until marriage. So that was like, it was very, that's what like the girls would be like, I'm not gonna have sex with you or whatever. There wasn't very much that was like what they had in order to like scathe off the guys. And then the boys, I'm not saying any of their names because I don't know them all, and it's just we don't want to get into that, but they tried on a lot of girls and like attempted a lot of sexual encounters, and they very quickly became pariahs of the town and they were shunned from everything. Nobody wanted them around. They were basically like little pre-sexual predators.
How old were they?
They would have been, I don't know exactly how old they are, but they would have been like teenagers at this point, or like preteen to teenagers at this time. So this led them to seek sexual gratification from within the home.
Oh.
And so now what I'm about to go into is somewhat unsubstantiated. It comes from Katherine's own recollection, but apparently some of it has been corroborated by family members and psychiatrists who work with her now and like at the time of her trial and everything. They take this as fact. So take this with a bit of a grain of salt, maybe.
Okay. I mean, I buy into it that these like predatory boys were that way with their family members.
But it seems that the two older boys started sexually abusing Katherine from approximately age 4.
Oh, God.
Joy was left alone because she was considered one of the boys. So Katherine endured all the sexual abuse herself. And it started slowly with like cuddling and touching, but it escalated from there. And soon it was all 4 boys who were abusing Katherine.
So fucked.
She was
4.
Yeah. The other older boys taught the younger boy, like they're just like, oh, this is what we're gonna do.
How much older were they? The brothers?
They would have been quite a bit older.
Because they would have been teenagers.
They were already like old enough to be like calling their mom terrible things like before she even moved. And then she had these new boys, and then she had Katherine.
Right.
So they were pretty young, and like this sexual abuse lasted quite a while. So I think it's possible that like the older boys were abusing her for a while, like maybe even years, and then it was like years later that the younger ones got into it. And that's where it's all like a little bit muddy. I don't know the exact details. But we know that there was sexual abuse from within the home from somewhere between 1 and 4 of the boys. I think closer to more of them than less. But probably. What has remained explicit is that her father did not sexually abuse her.
That's something, I guess.
I mean, like no father should be doing that. So like, it shouldn't be
Yeah,
like,
you
that's
don't
great,
exactly
but,
win a
like,
prize for that one.
but there's been no allegations of sexual abuse towards Katherine, from Katherine about him. He's
Do you
clearly,
think that he knew like the other boys were though?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't know. And I wouldn't be surprised either way, because I think he's like a very absent father. But I feel like it was probably, I feel like the parents just like, even if they did know, it's like things were so like rape and sexual abuse were such a normalized thing in their home.
Right.
It's like once you're at that point where like the father is like a massive alcoholic, so he's always just like out of it and angry, and like
Yeah.
when you're like such an alcoholic like that, it's like you're not even the person that you are. And then the mother is so out of it with like being depressed and resentful and just like hating her life. It's like I think they're so absorbed in their own life. I don't know, but I could see a situation where it's just the culture of their home to just see like something horrible and just be like, oh, that's normal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think also
he can't exactly hold anyone accountable when he's such a piece of shit. So,
and I think, and you'll see why in a little bit, but I think the boys were like a little bit kind of stealthy about it, especially the older ones.
That's so fucked up.
Because they knew that they should not have been doing this. They knew that.
Well, yeah.
And you'll see why in a little bit. So yeah, soon it was all of them, and due to the like very explicit and horrible conversations Katherine was having with her own mother, she again thinks that this is just how a family works.
That's crazy.
Which fucking sucks. Like that's so terrible.
Yeah.
So finally, years into the abuse, Katherine worked up the courage to talk to her mother and be like, and ask her like, what do you do when you don't want a boy to do these things to you? And the mom said, quote, "It's best to just let men do whatever they want. It's easier that way," end quote.
Fuck.
Which is just the worst advice to give to your daughter. And
that's
like
bad advice.
Katherine was just like, oh, okay. Like that, like was like, okay, that makes sense.
Fuck.
So that just is like gut wrenching to me. Like that sucks.
Yeah.
So, at this point, this is Katherine's lot in life for her childhood. It's awful. But there's one good thing in her life, and that is her uncle Oscar.
Okay.
This was Ken's brother, and he was kind of this like quasi celebrity in town. When he was younger, he was a champion horseman. And
love that.
Yeah, so he seems pretty cool. And as an adult, he maintained a horse farm where he kept his old champion horses and also took in rescue horses. And he just seemed like a chill, normal guy.
He sounds cool.
Yeah, like that's fucking awesome. Horse farms are sweet, and like horses are so great. I love horses.
Me too.
So Katherine spent a lot of time with Oscar, and she developed a huge love for animals. And she spent a lot of time rescuing injured animals and nursing them back to health. And she got really, really into that. And sometimes she would bring little ones home to her house, and her dad would be like, "Fuck you, you shouldn't do that." And like that's where she like really stood her ground and was like, "No, you don't touch this injured bird," or whatever. And like she would really stand up for herself. The bigger animals that she had found, she would like Oscar would help her, and she would bring them to the farm. And I'm sure she spent a lot of time there just like trying to escape the hellhole that was her home.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was really great for her. But yet another very harsh blow came for Katherine when at age 11, Oscar suddenly committed suicide.
Oh, that's so sad. And all the horses are left alone.
Yeah, I think he had a wife too, so I don't know. Like, I'm sure the horses were fine or whatever, but like, fuck, like nothing is going right in this girl's life, and then finally there's like one nice thing, and then he just kills himself. Oscar, unfortunately, had been suffering from horrible depression, and he just couldn't deal with it anymore. Katherine had no idea, so it was just shocking to her, of course. And so this was a like extra difficult time for Katherine. It seemed that it was like she didn't take it well. But it also did seem like Oscar's death did spark a very big change in Katherine, and something that was good at the time, but something that I think kind of really changed her life in a way. And so next time one of the boys approached her to abuse her, she fought back and she used all her might and she punched him in the face. And from that time on, every time one of them approached her, she punched, she hit, she kicked, and even it escalated till she stabbed one of them.
Whoa.
And now Katherine didn't know any different, and she didn't know that like the boys were not supposed to be sexually abusing her. But the older boys did know. They knew that what they were doing was wrong, and that people who were like sexual abusers or rapists in their culture would not be tolerated. And like they feared so much so that they were like they figured that if they were caught, like they would be sent off somewhere and like be castrated, like it was that big of an offense. So once she started
honestly
doing that,
they should be.
Yeah. But basically like they didn't fight her back. They were like, okay, she's realizing like if she tells on us, we're going to get in huge trouble. So the abuse essentially stopped.
Okay.
And so I think this is a really important moment for Katherine, because this is where she learns that she could fight back physically and that she's strong, and that, you know, there was this constant abuse that she suffered for all her life. And like as soon as she started being physically abusive back, or to me it sounds like self-defense right now, but like she learned that she could like punch somebody or stab somebody and they couldn't hurt her anymore.
Right.
So that's like, you know, it's good for the time, but like you'll see it's not a good lesson for Katherine, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened. And so also now Uncle Oscar has died. And this also affects the rest of the family, because he had kind of been a shield for the Knight family, because he was kind of a pillar of the community. Like people respected him a lot, and he kind of like vouched for their family people. And so people were kind of starting to see what the rest of the Knights were like, and they were all super fucked. So people did not like them. And then it kind of just came out that that their relationship was like came out of an affair, and that turned into a super shitty thing. And so they're like, okay, fuck, we should move again. So the family decided to move back to Aberdeen.
Okay.
So I don't know why.
But doesn't everybody already not like them there?
Seems like it. But I think that Katherine she had been sending letters back and forth to some of her family and kind of patching things up with some of them there. So I think that's why they moved back there.
Okay.
They moved to Moray to be near some of the Knight family, and now Barbara had been patching things up with some of her family. Okay. I think that's the only thing I read about it. But so they moved back to Aberdeen. Katherine starts busting into the local school. As with all new kids, typical bullying started, and the kids started testing her. But that really didn't last long, because Katherine quickly developed a reputation as being somebody that should not be messed with. Yeah,
she just punches them or stabs them.
Yes, essentially, yes.
Fuck.
If anybody slighted her in the least, like even a little bit, she would fight back 10 times harder, to the point that she even stabbed a kid one time and like got away with it.
What did she stab him with?
A knife.
She just had a knife with her?
She kept a knife on her. I've seen it in a number of places.
I'm not surprised why she would, but...
No, and you'll see she really likes knives.
Oh, fuck.
In a number of different publications, I saw that she like kept it in different places, but in one of them said that like she kept it in her skirt, like really close to her crotch, so that like nobody would ever, like you wouldn't be able to like pat her down and like find it.
Right.
So Katherine was like, she basically in this school, she was like super nice. She was like really fun person to be around. People liked her. Teachers liked her. They got along well with her. She was like very uneducated until this point. essentially illiterate, but she did try really hard in school and liked participating. But as soon as she was angered in any way, she would just turn into like a monster. So
Fuck.
she, for the most part, was great, but as soon as you angered her, just like raging.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah, and apparently she was like really mean to the younger kids in school and like would bully them, and yeah, she was mostly nice but also super nasty when she was mad.
Okay.
So things kind of came for a halt to Katherine one day when she was given a poor grade on a test by her favorite teacher. Katherine took this very personally and became enraged when she saw that he'd given her a bad mark. And like, he's just handing out tests, like he just graded things like he doesn't even know.
She probably did a bad job. Like,
yeah, she probably just failed a test. And like, she seemed to do well in school despite not being like literate.
How is that possible?
I don't know, but it seemed that like she tried really hard. Like she was a very hard worker. And I think teachers like a lot of the time can see that in a student, can see that like you're trying really hard, maybe you don't come. And I'm sure like it was probably the case with a lot of kids in that area or in that time, like they're coming from like just like backgrounds of families that just do hard labor. Like maybe you grew up working on a farm and like didn't go to school. I don't know. But yeah, she just sat there like seething, and the teacher finally was like, are you okay? What's wrong? And she just flew into a rage and screamed at him and was like, I thought you were on my side. Like she took it really personally. She felt like he had like slighted her personally and was like, she couldn't understand why he was like being so mean to her. And he's like, what? Like he did not understand what was going on. And it got to the point where it turned violent, and Katherine got out her knife and started like slashing at him. And he started to realize, he's
in
like
class
in front of everybody. And he started to realize like, because it's like almost like she would go into like a psychosis and she could not stop herself. So he's like, so he ended up punching her in the face and she fell down on the ground. Because mind you, this is still a man versus like a teenage girl. So like he's definitely stronger than her, but she's a knife. And it was at the point where he's like, she's going to kill me if I don't do something. So he punched her in the face.
That's so scary.
Yeah. So
imagine just being a teacher and a kid just attacks you pretty much out of nowhere.
Yeah. You're like, this is not my fucking job.
What's happening? Yeah.
You fucking stabbed.
Did not sign up for this.
Yeah. It's terrifying because it comes out. You're never expecting to just be sitting in class and like somebody tries to stab you. It's terrifying. It must be. Especially like, because it seemed like he had a really good relationship with her. So it like
even more so.
Nowhere. Yeah. And like, imagine just sitting in class seeing this too. Like, you're just like, la la la, just like got your test. Oh, I got
suddenly she's nice. Stabbing the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd feel the same. And so, like, do you think she actually goes into a like psychosis kind of thing? Or do you think she's aware of her actions when she does this?
Yeah. I don't think it's a true psychosis. But I think
like she knows what she's doing, but she's just losing control.
Yeah. I do think part of it is like, and I think there's probably a difference between like you literally can't control and you're
not even aware.
Yeah, it's not like what was I gonna say? There's like you literally can't control, and then it's like you don't know how to control, or like you choose not to, like you allow yourself to be and that's kind of a gray area. But essentially this incident happens. The teacher and Katherine are both suspended while they do an investigation. Through the investigation, I'm sure like the class full of witnesses, they realize like, oh, this was all Katherine. So the teacher comes back. Yeah. Katherine comes back for like a month and, she can't talk to the teacher. And then that's when she drops out of school. And at this point, I think she's 15. She's pretty much illiterate and she's done with school. I was not at this point that this diagnosis happened for her, but I think it was much later in life. But I think it's more interesting to talk about it now because you'll see the progression of it. Okay. But at some point in her life, she is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
Okay. I mean, who wouldn't be with that childhood? But okay.
Well, yeah. And I mean, like, I'm definitely no expert. I did a lot of reading up on it and stuff. But it's like, there's various different disorders or whatever that you can have that lead, like, it's not the only one that has includes violence, and definitely not all people, with borderline personality are violent.
For sure.
But I'll just read you what they have it as the definition from CAMH, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And it's a Canadian one. That's where I'm getting it from. But quote, borderline personality disorder is a serious, long-lasting, and complex mental health problem. People with BPD have difficulty regulating or handling their emotions or controlling their impulses. They are
sounds like Katherine.
Yeah. They are highly sensitive to what is going on around them and can react with intense emotions to small changes in their environment.
Okay.
People with borderline personality disorder have been described as living with constant emotional pain. And the symptoms of bipolar, I keep getting it mixed up with bipolar because it's BP. The symptoms of borderline personality disorder are a result of efforts to cope with this pain.
Okay.
And so some examples, and I just picked a few that were relevant here, but intense but short-lived bouts of anger, depression, or anxiety, emptiness associated with loneliness and neediness, intense fear of being alone or being abandoned, agitation with even a brief separation from either family, friends, therapists, whatever they're, I guess, leaning on. Impulsive and emotionally volatile behaviors that may lead to the very abandonment and alienation that the person fears. Volatile and stormy interpersonal relationships with attitudes towards others that can shift from idealization to anger and dislike as a result of like a very black and white thinking that perceives people as good or bad and like not really thinking about things nuancedly.
I mean, to me, like obviously there's different reasons that mental health issues can occur, but all those descriptions you just said, it sounds like everything that was modeled in her childhood, like random anger, extremely unhealthy relationships.
Yeah. And from what I was reading, it does seem like this can occur as a result of like a specifically chaotic childhood. And like, it's a very,
it makes sense why it would.
Environmentally kind of created thing, although I don't think triggered. I don't know if it has any genetic component. But it seems like the biggest thing with borderline personality disorders is like there's this super shitty cycle that they're just constantly going through, and it kind of
it sounds
it colors all of their relationships, and you'll see there's so many clear examples of this in her future. But it's like the person with borderline personality disorder has just a visceral fear of abandonment, and they like just latch onto the person, and it's generally like their intimate relationships.
Shout out Jodi Arias.
And they cope with it by being like really intense towards that person. And then it leads them to have like really erratic behaviors at that person. And then that person then ends up abandoning them. And the cycle is like, it's this phase of total idealization of the person that lasts until they hit what's called the devaluation phase. And that's when the person with borderline personality disorder gets really angry with the other person because they've like really overthought things in their head. And they're like, the other person is manipulating me and they're rejecting me and they're going to abandon me. And so that leads them to
kind of self-sabotage.
They do. And then they get really angry and like in some cases violent towards that person. And that cycle basically repeats until usually the person that doesn't have borderline personality disorders like can't deal with it anymore. Occasionally the borderline personality person will leave, but generally I think it's the other person that abandons them, and then now that's an example in their head where they have been abandoned to use
they're right for the next think that they were
and it's really shitty because it seems like, you know, this is like it's a symptom of this mental health issue that they just like overly feel these emotions, and like, you know, it's either you really can't help it or like in a lot of cases, like, you know, you need like therapy or something to help you realize how to deal with these emotions. Clearly, this was not something that Katherine was getting help with by any means. And it just sounds so chaotic and so like awful. And there's a very high suicide rate of people with borderline personality disorders. It's like 10%, because it leads to a lot of depression.
So sad. And it kind of seems like it's something that's like socially contagious too, because maybe if she was raised in a different environment, she wouldn't be that way. But then she's probably specifically going to seek out the people who will enable her behaviors at first. And it proves to her that she was right to be abandoned. And then it's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're in a relationship with somebody who allows this behavior, then you learn that you can act like that. So it's either you're with a person that's allowing the behavior and like at some point probably enabling it, or you're being abandoned. And then that is leading you to, like justify all your feelings that are like really you're like really overthinking.
Yeah.
At this point, she is now 15 years old. She's dropped out of school, and it is her dream. And like, I'm shitting you not, it's her dream to follow in her father's footsteps and work at a slaughterhouse. That's what she really wants to do. She really liked the idea of like slaughtering things.
Oh my God.
So don't know where that came from, but that's terrifying.
Yeah, that's fucking scary.
And at first, apparently, she like went to the slaughterhouse to like get a job, and they're like, "You're a woman, no." So she went to go work at like a like fabric factory, or like where they make clothes, whatever.
Something womanly.
Yeah, because she's a woman, so obviously that's what she has to do. And like she was really good at that, but like she didn't love it. But she ended up just like hanging out with the slaughterhouse guys a lot, and they started to realize that like she was as tough and as gross as them. And so she ended up like gaining all the respect, and like they eventually hired her at the slaughterhouse when she was 16.
Okay.
And it turns out she was really, really good at working at the slaughterhouse.
She was really good at murdering?
Well, she was not doing the murdering. She was mostly doing like the chopping up stuff. She started off at like the lowest position, and she like worked her way up to the top. But so as soon as she got there, the men learned like to not mess with her. Like in school, she like made it very clear that she was like an aggressive person not to be messed with. But then once she had established that, she like just got in with the rest of them. And she also established like how good she was at her job. Her abilities were very quickly recognized, and it took her no time at all to work her way up to the most complex job in the place, which was deboning. This was the job. Yeah, this was the job that her father was also doing. So they would work together a lot. Now, the owners of the slaughterhouse.
Do I want to know what deboning is?
It's like taking the bones out.
Why is that the like top job?
Just because it like requires the most skill.
Okay.
It's like a very skilled job to like, I don't know, I guess. I don't know exactly what they mean in this scenario, but like I worked at restaurants and like you debone fish, it's just taking the bones out. But this is mostly cows and pigs. So, you know, I don't know what bones are taken out of where. But there is a deboning section. It requires the most skill, and she's like the best at it. Okay. So the owners of the slaughterhouse very quickly recognized that she was a very valuable employee, because not only were her like level of skill and efficiency really high, but she actually raised the efficiency of everybody else. Because, and I don't know that this is true, but I think what probably happened is like she's the only woman there, or one of very few women there, and she's doing really, really well. And like all the other guys are like, well, I'm not going to be outdone by a woman. So they all like raise their like try really hard so that definitely they become as efficient as her. So the owners are like, oh shit, like we don't want to lose this girl. They didn't give her any more money, but what they did give her was her own set of butcher's knives and a really nice leather case.
No.
Yes. And she coveted this set of butcher's knives, and she brought them with her to work every day. She took super good care of them. She even hung them near her bed, because she never knew when she was going to need them.
Yeah.
So this section that I'm going to tell you about, I don't know how corroborated it is and how true it is. I read this one book called Maneater that is it's like a dramatized story of Katherine Knight, and like at the beginning it's like,
I like that name, that Maneater.
Yeah, I don't have it with me, but there's like a picture of, I won't say actually because I don't run it. but they're like some of the characters have been fictionalized. So I don't know. This is one part where like I couldn't get a whole lot of other information about it, but just generally, apparently she really liked to spend time in the pig slaughtering room.
Okay.
There was another source that said that that was her job at one point. I don't know if she did this at one point. But slaughtering the pigs, and the pig slaughtering was like way more gruesome than the cow slaughtering. The cows, it was like they would take them one by one and like shoot them in the head, and that was it. But the pigs were all like the pigs were all in like one pen, and it was all like they would be seeing each other get slaughtered. And apparently you just like the entire day you just hear pigs being slaughtered and squealing, and like
that's so sad.
It's really, they went into a lot of detail, and it's fucking nasty and really sad.
Yeah.
But apparently Katherine like became really good friends with the guy whose job it was to do that, was to like just kill pigs one by one.
Okay.
And she got like super into it and would like spend her lunch breaks like helping him slaughter pigs. And like
great.
Allegedly she would like, you know, torture them, and like she would like run after them and just like hack at them and see like how many times she could hack at them before they would fall down and die. And like
what the fuck?
She would do like really gruesome shit to them. And apparently other people like knew this, but they're like, oh, that's just Katherine. Like, I don't know. I think just working at a slaughterhouse, you got to become desensitized to all that shit.
Yeah.
But that just sounds disgusting. And I don't know how corroborated it is. I don't think it came from nothing. I don't know if it was if like in reality it was like that gruesome. Like maybe in reality she just liked watching or something. But there's a lot of people who have varying descriptions of that.
Okay.
And I thought it was important to mention because it's just so disgusting. Sorry.
Yeah.
So by this time she's like 17, 18. She's 6 foot tall. She's very muscular.
She's 6 foot tall?
Yeah, she's a tall lady.
Okay.
And
that makes her way more intimidating.
Yeah, she's scary. Like she's a very regular looking woman. If you want to see pictures of her, either you can just Google it or you can go into the drive. There's like a couple of photos of her. I'll like obviously have some photos throughout this, but she's like a redhead, like very like average looking woman, but tall. And you know, she's like slaughtering shit all day. So like she's like muscular.
Right.
So outside of work, she's like a bit girlier. And she's like apparently quite a catch, and like people like her.
Okay.
And she has a lot of suitors in the slaughterhouse minor community.
Does she now?
Yeah, and she would go out drinking every night. And this is another point that came up in that book, but I don't know if it's actually true because I could not find this fact anywhere else. But apparently she would go out with all the guys who were like all alcoholics and like huge drinkers, but she actually didn't drink, and she would pretend to drink.
Okay.
So she was like always sober. And in the book, it was like she had this deal with the bartender where he would just give her lemonade and like she would be pretending to drink.
Okay.
So
that's kind of smart, to be honest.
It kind of makes sense because I've found no instance where it was like Katherine was drunk or Katherine was drinking, or like it would be that she would go out drinking, but it didn't seem. I think that it's very possible that she saw like the raging alcoholic that her father was, and was like,
exactly.
I think that happens with a lot of kids of alcoholics.
Right. So, I think it goes either way, or I shouldn't generalize. But.
It could go one way or the other, or in the middle. I don't know, like anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
It's definitely, I've seen and heard of a lot of instances where that's the case.
Right.
But by age 17, Katherine had developed a kind of thing for 22-year-old David Collette. He was smaller than her. He was a lot more chill than her. But he was still
well, that's not hard.
Yeah. He was still another raging alcoholic.
Okay.
And once allegedly Katherine got into like a super violent fight with another guy who was bothering David at the bar. And she
like how she was the one who got into the fight with him.
She beat the shit out of him until he was like missing teeth.
Oh my God.
And everyone there was like, oh, it's just a drunken fight or whatever. But the bartender was like, oh, bitch, that lady is not drunk. And so and so he kicked them out. And so Katherine and David ended up at the only other place in the town that served alcohol, which was this hotel. And usually that was for like the like higher class people in town, but they went there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much how their relationship started. And it seemed like a very good match at first. David actually seemed pretty impressed that Katherine was willing to get in a fight for him, which is interesting because like I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, it's kind of romantic, I guess.
He's like, it made him feel wanted, apparently.
Okay.
Cool. And they had a very intimate sex life. Katherine, so you'll see like this is very clearly what Katherine learned when she was younger. Like, and you will see this as a pattern in all of her future relationships, but like Katherine would have sex with David constantly. And like everyone was like, she was apparently very good in bed. And I think what they mean by this is like she wanted to have sex all the time.
Oh, okay.
And so like this is what guys I think really liked about being in a relationship with her. Like this is an aspect of the relationship that they really enjoyed.
I mean, okay.
And it seemed like it wasn't that she didn't do that because she was really into having sex. And like, if anything, she didn't really seem to care much for it. But she thought that this is what you did when you loved somebody. Like when you wanted to prove that you loved them, then you had sex with them all the time because that's all men want from women. So she has this really screwed up, like obviously from being sexually abused her entire life.
Yeah.
And also watching her father treat her mother like that. It's very
What
obvious.
else would she think? Yeah.
Exactly. It's very obvious where that kind of comes from, but it's very clear that she has a very unhealthy view of sex and like what a marriage is and what a relationship is.
Yeah.
And like how sex works in a relationship.
Right.
And I mean, I guess there is no one way or the other, but like it just seems like a lot.
Yeah.
So things were going well for them and they moved in together and they were really enjoying being together. And so at this point, Katherine is like, she's still very like flirty at work with a lot of men. And so a lot of the men's wives started pressuring David into into marrying Katherine because I guess they don't want her flirting with them. I don't know what this was, but anyway. And he didn't do that immediately. So Katherine started really overthinking things and getting really in her head. And this is, I think, a very good example of the like bipolar thing is she started getting super pushy and like being like, you have to marry me or whatever. And David was down. He just thought that she didn't think that she wanted to marry him. But when she told him that she did, he was like, okay, cool, let's get married.
Okay.
And now at one point, I don't know if this was, because again, this is another point that a lot of places, a lot of sources had this happening, had this instance at like Katherine had taken David to meet the parents and this happened there, or some places said that this happened at the wedding. But David met her mother and father, and her mother basically came up to him and was like, you need to be careful because if the second you do anything wrong, she's gonna kill you.
Oh fuck.
And he's like, okay. And she was like being super serious about it and was like, you watch yourself because she's gonna murder you.
That's terrifying.
David did not heed this advice. And,
oh fuck. Okay.
So they ended up getting married and they had like a marriage, and it apparently was like super cheap because they spent all the money on alcohol, and it was just this big shit show of boozing and cruising and everyone's wasted, and David spent the whole day drinking. What am I doing here? And so by the time that they are finished their wedding, like he's on the back of Katherine's motorcycle and she's driving him, and
I love how she's driving and he's on the back of it.
She is the man in the relationship.
Clearly. Like, yeah.
So they go home or to their hotel or wherever they end up. I think it's a hotel. And they have sex 3 times. And Katherine's just like going. And finally, after time number 3, after sexual encounter number 3, David just like passes out, like completely out. He like can't take it anymore because he's wasted and he's just had sex with his wife 3 times. And Katherine gets so upset about this, enraged, because she was told, and I don't know why you would ever tell your child this, but this is their family, but she was told that on their parents' wedding night, they had sex 5 times. And so she just could not understand. She's like, if he didn't have sex with me 5 times, then he must not love me. So she's angry. So she starts hitting him, trying to wake him up, roughing him up. Finally, she starts choking him to the point that he's like almost like passing out, and he finally wakes up because he's like gonna die.
Yeah.
And she's like, why? Like, and she gets mad at him, and they have this big fight. And she basically explains to him, like, you need to have sex with me 5 times, not 3. And so finally he's like, okay. And like, he's still wasted and disoriented and like terrified. And so he's like, I need to go freshen up. So he goes in the bathroom, locks himself in the bathroom for the rest of the night so that she doesn't murder him.
This is not a good way to start, but okay.
So this is the start of their marriage.
Great.
And it like, you know, kind of goes like that. And after that, he's like, okay, I don't know what happened there, but like, we'll just keep going and like, hopefully everything's fine. But it was not fine. Their entire marriage. Yes. Katherine was extremely physically abusive towards David.
That's fucked.
Yes. Over like ridiculous little things like coming home late or, you know, hanging out with guys, whatever. And I'm sure that David was not like, you know, I think he was an alcoholic. At some point he starts trucking, and it seems like they both kind of cheat on each other, at various points. Right. It's not like he was like the best husband ever. But still, she's like abusive towards him.
Yeah, that's right. Fucked. And she's so like, because I think in a lot of situations,
way bigger than him.
Yeah, exactly. In a lot of situations, it's the person who is physically bigger and stronger that's the abusive one,
which is usually the man.
Right.
But in this case, it's the opposite.
So interesting.
And it's huge indicators of at least what I read about borderline personality disorder. Mm-hmm. She's very possessive. She's very suspicious of him. It really seems like she thinks or she thought that like by giving herself to him and having sex with him constantly, like it seems like she thought that she could make him be how she wants him to be if she has sex with him constantly.
Yeah, like she doesn't. What else does she know?
Yeah, and so, but he's just like a normal person. He's like, sweet, my wife wants to have sex with me all the time, but like, still acts like a regular person.
Right.
And so she like expects extreme loyalty from him, but doesn't get it. And I don't think that she gets. Like, I think that if she had behaved nicely, like I don't know that he would have cheated on her. I think he cheats on her because she's horrible.
That's what happens.
You know, and I don't know this to be true. It does seem like there's a big culture of like infidelity and whatever, but
right. But I feel like the more you're compulsively concerned about someone cheating on you, the more they're gonna cheat on you.
Yeah, and if you physically abuse, like I think.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I think cheating is like really bad. Like it's something that I like would never do, and if somebody did to me, I'd be really unhappy and end the relationship. But if somebody is physically abusive to me, then like I don't think I owe them loyalty.
But exactly.
And like in a very, if you're going to be super like healthy and proper about it, like I would break up with them. But I think for a lot of reasons and a lot of ways, there's people stay in relationships and whatever.
Yeah.
So fair enough. Anyway, so I watched a documentary and both David's mother and one of his sisters were interviewed in it. Okay. And their perspective is very interesting because they said in the beginning, they're like, we really liked Katherine. She was really cool. We thought they were a good match. We got along really well. But as time went on, they both started to get to know her dark side, which was like only came out when she was angry. But she became angry over like really little things, right?
Yeah.
And so they said that David warned them that if they noticed Katherine was in a cranky mood at all, or if she was upset about anything, to just get out right away. Just go.
Fuck.
And like, that's terrifying, first of all.
That's very scary.
He specifically warned them that if she was angry and she got her hands on a knife, she could really hurt somebody.
What the fuck?
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So things only get worse from here.
Okay.
In 1974, they had a baby together and they named her Melissa. So shortly after, and also like basically during her birth, so I guess before then, David got fed up with Katherine and decided that he wanted to leave her for another woman in Queensland. And it was while she was in labor that she realized that she couldn't find him and nobody could find David. So that's really shitty to do to someone while they're literally giving birth. Like that's a horrible thing to do, but also she's abusive. So it's one big thing. So it's during her birth that he's gone and she finds us out. So this is her being abandoned. She does not take this well.
Right.
The next day or the next day after she's like out of the hospital with her new baby, somebody sees Katherine walking the baby down the street in the stroller and like just violently slamming the stroller from side to side. And they're like,
God.
somebody calls on her, thank God. And
This
she's
girl, like, she should not be a parent.
no.
Yeah.
So she gets admitted to St. Elmo Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And at this point, here she's diagnosed with postnatal depression, and so she spends several weeks recuperating. Which I think you can definitely have one thing on top of the other, and like, but I don't know that
that's true, but
I don't know that it's. I'm sure they probably saw like I think, and I definitely know now it's the case that like they monitor women very closely when you're pregnant. They're like constantly looking for like postnatal depression, postpartum depression, all these different things.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they probably were like, she just had a baby and she's acting erratically. She's postnatal depression. Yeah. So she gets out after a while, and then they give her the baby back. Then she takes the baby, lays it down on a train track with an active train. Why do they give
the baby back?
She then, after she's put Melissa down on a train track,
that's so fucked.
Steals an axe from somebody's property and goes into town and starts threatening to kill people with an axe. Thankfully, somebody, I think it was a person who like worked at a convenience store, saw her doing this or like was passing by or whatever, and they picked up the baby and saved it from the train, which would have come by and
what the fuck
wrecked the baby.
Yeah.
Katherine was again sent to the hospital, but she was able to check herself out the very next day.
That doesn't seem like a good idea.
Still nobody takes her baby away.
Yeah.
After she laid it on a train track.
Right. Like that alone
is not right.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody took.
She should not have a baby.
No, I don't know if anybody took the baby away for a little bit of time, but she has her baby back because now she's out of the hospital. And she wants to go find David. So she went to the home of one of her coworkers and told her that she needed a lift to the doctor's office because Melissa was sick. So Melissa's with her.
Okay.
The coworker agrees to drive her, but once in the car, Katherine pulled out one of her butcher's knives and holds it to the woman and is like, tries to get her to drive to David's mother's house.
I like how she's just carrying these knives with her at all times.
Always has her knives. Which are used in a fucking slaughterhouse.
This seems like it's going to end well.
And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So thankfully, the coworker made up an excuse to pull over at a service station, and the police were called. Katherine later said of this incident that she wanted to ask David's mother why David left her, and that she planned to kill his mother before she killed herself.
Okay.
But Katherine was not charged with any of these crimes. But she was admitted to the Morrisette Psychiatric Hospital. And I think this is where she was formally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Not positive. Did
they keep her for more than a day this time?
Yes, they did.
Thank God.
But not for very long. She was out after a couple of months. And when she got out, David left the other woman that he left Katherine for and moved back in with Katherine to give the relationship another go. And this time he brought his mother along. And I believe she also has her baby back. And
seriously?
So, yes, this man is either, and I think we can
like, you can do better, bro.
But I think a lot of these men, well, I think, he's got a baby with her and like, I think he does like her, but I think a lot of these men are like, a lot of people, because there's more relationships, and a lot of these people are like, why do these men stay with her? And I think a lot of it is like she had sex with him all the time and they liked that. And it's like I think men definitely more than women can be enticed by that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sure that's not all of it.
Yeah, she sounds like the type of person who could be very charming when she wanted to be.
She is extremely charming. She's described as charming a lot. So she's definitely charming and manipulative.
All these fucking people are.
Yeah. And I think she's super violent, but like when she's not, she's like everybody likes her. And all the people, all like the victims or not victims, but victims of her relationships, like the mother and the sister of David, they were interviewed and they really liked her. Later they're like scared of her, but like they're like, I thought she was great.
That's kind of crazy that she can convince people of that.
Yeah, it's like a real like Jekyll and Hyde thing.
Yep.
Which is so fascinating. And so, okay, did not find a whole lot of examples, but I did find a few. And like, there's the beginning where she's like abusing her baby, clearly.
Right.
But I definitely think it's true that she was quite physically abusive toward her children. She has more children.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, she has another baby in 1980 with David. And so David's sister in that documentary.
Who is letting her have another baby?
There is no oversight here. There's
like
nobody stepping in, nobody being like, oh, this woman has been put in a psychiatric hospital 3 times in like a couple years. She
tried to murder her baby.
She tried to murder her baby. She tried to allegedly murder her mother-in-law and threatened to commit suicide. Like, she's a violent ass woman.
Yeah.
But I think she's also like super charming toward the police and everything. There's a number of occasions where
it's always how it goes, isn't it?
Yes, she's super manipulative.
Yeah.
Yeah, David's sister mentioned that there was a time where she was over and Katherine was bathing the kids and she heard them screaming and like they were in pain. God. And she goes in and she sees Katherine like holding them under the really hot water tap.
Fucking of course she's doing that.
And she told David about this and he just said to her, please don't say anything to Katherine about this today, because if you do, she might kill you in your sleep.
What the fuck?
And this is just like the reality that they're living. So, as I said, they had another baby in 1980, Natasha. And I wish I could say things got better from here, but that is not the case. Their relationship was David being a complete alcoholic and just constant physical abuse from Katherine towards David.
That's so fucked.
So after the birth of their second baby, Katherine somehow became even more violent and David was getting scared. So, and then one night he came home later than expected and she was pissed. He was at a darts contest or something, like a darts league at a pub. And
that's no excuse. You get home on time.
Yeah, she was pissed. She attacked him and she smacked him over the head with like a cast iron frying pan and it fractured his skull. And he like made it out of the house and like passed out on a neighbor's lawn and it fractured his skull and it put him in the hospital for a week. And
that's terrifying.
While he's in the hospital from injuries she gave to him, she burned all of his clothing in the bathtub.
What the fuck?
So when David got home, the police really wanted to press charges, but Katherine pulled out her best behavior and convinced David to not press charges for the sake of their children. And so yet again, she got away with her really violent behavior.
Wow.
One day out of the blue, Katherine just up and decided to leave David. So this was a huge shock. He came home from work to find that she had packed up and left, and she moved back to Aberdeen. And I think this is where she developed a back problem while working in the slaughterhouse. So she was taking time off on disability and she had moved in with her parents and that was not going well because their family is also fucking crazy. So she ended up getting another house like through the government or something.
Okay.
And she ended up meeting a man named David Saunders. So this is David number 2. He was a local miner, a very hard worker, a hard drinker, very on brand for Katherine. So he moved in with Katherine and her daughters, and he brought a little dingo pup that he had.
Oh, I love that.
You're not going to love what happens to the dingo pup.
Of course. Fucking of course. Just leave the dog alone.
Unsurprisingly, Katherine was very physically abusive towards David number 2.
Yeah.
The same type of stuff with David number 1 when he was late, or she would accuse him of cheating, and the relationship ended with her slitting the dingo pup's throat in front of him.
What the fuck?
But actually no, the relationship did not end up there. David tried to leave her many times, but she just would not have it. Yeah. So in June of 1988, Katherine and Dave had a daughter, and 2 years later after that, David number 2 was like, I just can't. And so he said he was going on a trip to see his friend and he never came back. He literally like hid away to try to avoid her. And
I'd do the same thing.
he claimed, oops, sorry,
Ring light.
pulled down the ring light. He said that he feared for his life, and Katherine tried to get out of his friends where he was. They knew where he was, but they were not telling her.
Good.
And no matter how hard she tried to look for him, she could not find him.
Yeah.
Very good call,
Good.
David number 2.
Yeah.
So
Shitty he left the kid though.
For sure, but he very well could have died. So
yeah.
Good on you, mate. Good on you, mate. That's my Australian accent.
It's really, really good. Good job.
Sorry to everybody, and sorry to Australians around the world.
Yeah.
Katherine then moved on to another guy, and his name was John Chillingworth. There's not much about their relationship, but he was a slaughterhouse worker, very similar to the past David's. Their relationship followed the exact same pattern. She had one child with him in 1991, a boy named Eric. Their relationship lasted 3 years, and it was abusive the entire way, and it ended with Katherine abandoning John and all the kids for a man named John Price, who she was having an affair with. So now it's John number 2.
Do we know much about her kids during this time? Like, was she still leaving them on train tracks?
No, I think she was just more physically abusive toward them. I'm sure
fucked.
We don't know a whole lot about them. I think they kind of at this point want to remain anonymous. I don't like bringing too much about the kids up. Like, these are just victims that I don't need to like get into their lives. In my opinion.
Yeah.
But she's clearly treating them poorly, and
no one's doing anything about it, sounds like. Yeah.
Hopefully they're spending more time with their fathers than they are with their mother.
Yeah.
But basically every relationship she's had, 2 kids, 1 kid. So now that's the 5th kid that she's had. So now John Price. Katherine met John Price in 1993. They were both 38 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was a divorcee with 3 kids who he loved dearly. He was described as a great man and a father. He was a country guy who worked in the mines. So finally, this is a miner, not a slaughterhouse guy.
Is that good? Is that a step up?
I don't know. Either way, mining is super dangerous, and it's like pretty dirty, and slaughtering is just fucking gross. I don't know. I would probably choose a miner over a slaughterhouse guy, but maybe that's mean. I don't know. Sorry. I don't know.
Sorry to all you slaughterhouse workers out there.
It's a very essential job. It's an essential job. Like, I don't want to shit on it. I just wouldn't want to do it. That's all.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then again, it's a very similar type to the last 3. Very heavy drinker, very hard worker, but like people like him. John Price's daughters, I saw a documentary that they were in, and they talked about really liking Katherine at first. They thought that she was a pretty good match for their father until she wasn't. And again, this is another instance where Katherine is like having sex with the guy constantly. And like, I think that's a big draw for her. Like, this is probably the only woman in the town who will have sex with them like 5 times a day constantly.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right? Especially like, look, when you're a mom and you've had 5 kids and whatever, like even the dads, like there's nobody doing that. That's like outrageous. 5 times a day.
Right.
That's
a lot.
That's what I'm thinking the like average rate is for her, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, one of them described an incident where she was one of the daughters of John Price's daughters was in the car with Katherine, and Katherine swerved not to avoid a dog, but to hit a dog.
No, what the fuck?
And then continued to repeatedly go back to swerve and hit the dog repeatedly.
I hate that.
And the daughter was like, why are you doing that? And she just said, quote, I don't like dogs, end quote.
Oh my God.
So yeah, monster.
You could have just told me that.
Yes. Well, and
you don't like dogs? Okay.
It's just like, why? That's so violent. Like, to go out of your way to do that.
And she used to like animals.
I know. Well, that's why it's so weird. Is like at one point she was literally healing animals. And now she's just slitting throats, swerving to hit dogs, just like horrible.
That's so fucked.
This relationship was again the same as last relationships. Katherine was super abusive to him. She says that he beat her as well, but this is unsubstantiated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure both of them weren't, you know.
Yeah, and this is
shitty.
yeah, I think he was definitely not like super shitty. He seemed like a pretty chill guy. He definitely like drank a lot, but
right. But he wasn't as violent.
no, and I don't think any of the other guys were particularly violent.
Okay.
But like probably like once she started being violent towards them, they were like, okay, well, I'll be violent towards you because
yeah,
it's what self-defense is.
Yep.
They did not have any children together, but she did want
Good.
John to marry her, and he refused.
Good call.
Although the couple were not living together, Katherine acted like she lived there and she never left. And
Yeah.
then once, I think it was when he decided, like when he made it clear that he wasn't going to marry her, she started getting really mad and she started to get really manipulative. And so she tried to manipulate the children. She once sat down one of the daughters and told her that John was not her real father and that her mother had cheated on John with another man who was her actual father.
That's so shitty.
All of which was not true. And eventually John Price got fed up with Katherine, but he could not get her to leave.
Yeah.
One day, Katherine found John's will, which left everything to his ex-wife and children. Naturally, this absolutely enraged Katherine, and she just started demanding $10,000 from John to leave, and he said no. To get back at John, Katherine took a video camera and recorded some of, so he had these like old expired first aid kits that he had taken from work, which like very likely he got them like from the garbage, like they were expired. But she took videos of this and sent it to his workplace saying that he stole them, and he got fired from his job, which he held for 17 years.
That's so shitty.
Which is so shitty. Like this is his entire livelihood.
Yeah.
He ended up getting another job, but like he worked there for 17 years. Like that's really, really shitty of her to do. Mm-hmm. Despite this incident, he stayed with Katherine. The physical abuse continued, and it went as far as Katherine stabbing John.
Of course. Like I'm not even surprised.
Which it seems to always end up with.
Yeah. Do we know the details of the stabbing?
We know she got mad and she stabbed him. Like not to the point. I don't know that he had to go to like
stab.
No. But a stab.
Yeah, I mean that's really scary.
So at this point, Katherine, all of her kids are now in school. She's out of work on disability. She has her own house, but she spends all of her time at John's house. Right. But she starts getting like really weird. And she starts decorating her home in like a really bizarre way. Like she basically like every inch of her home is covered with like weird farming equipment or animal pelts or skulls or like
that's so weird
knives. Like it's just like a literal house of horrors.
Oh god.
And like honestly, some of that stuff, like
some of it sounds cool. Yeah,
I have skulls in my home, but
some of it sounds cool. But just because it's her, it's scary.
But because it's her, and because it's like so excessive, it's just like a lot. I have a video which I'll put in, and I can.
Okay, I want to see that.
I will send it to you. You can watch it after. It's just
okay.
I'll show it to you after. Just
okay.
It's easier. And she also starts just like when she's home alone, all she does is watch like really scary horror movies, like slasher movies. I mean, constantly.
For sure. So basically, she's you, Madison.
Well, she's me times like 1,000.
Yeah.
And like, I really like dogs. Like I also like my children and I don't abuse them. Like, but yes, like if I like my like evil twin, like times 1,000,000.
Yeah.
I would have this similar decor and movie interests.
Yeah. You and her Fair just enough. Hanging out watching movies.
I would never want to hang out with this woman ever. Yeah. So it's 1999 and John was getting really desperate to leave Katherine. And she was equally desperate to keep him. So that's a recipe for just
this isn't going to end well.
This does not end well, I will say. So one night they got in a huge fight and it ended in a visit from the police. So now on Monday at work, and like, the police, like she gets the police to leave and nothing happens.
Right.
But on Monday at work, he started telling people that Katherine had been doing and showing people his stab wounds. On Tuesday, he told his boss that he had to go down to the police station and the courthouse to see what he could do to get Katherine out of his house. And they told him that he would have to wait 3 weeks for a court date.
Wow.
Unfortunately for John, He didn't know it at the time, but he was already living out the final day of his life.
Oh, fuck.
So his coworkers begged him not to go home that night on the Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Everyone was afraid that she would kill him. Like, this was literally, people were like, she's gonna fucking kill you.
That's so scary.
He feared for his children, so he decided to go home anyway.
A
very bad move, John.
Yeah.
But like, I see why he did that.
It makes sense for the kids, but that's not a good situation to put himself into.
Yes, but like right now, John has pretty much ran around for days trying to get help from various people because he feared for his life and nobody would help him. Meanwhile, Katherine was busy making some sort of weird video. She got this new set of black lingerie. She took footage of her and her kids, and she's like saying this
while she's stuff. In the lingerie.
Yes. She's saying, and this video, like, I don't think it exists outside of like evidence or whatever.
I was gonna ask.
I don't have it.
Damn.
But a lot of the things she's saying, which I don't know what they are, but they were perceived by a lot of people as like a last will and testament.
Oh, fuck.
But again, I'm not sure what exactly was said.
Okay.
So when John got home, the house was empty. It looked like Katherine had sent the kids to a sleepover somewhere. Relieved, John went to sleep. Katherine
don't be relieved.
No, he should not have been relieved. Katherine arrived home at about 11:30 and found John sleeping in bed. She put on the new black nightie. She got into bed with him and had sex with John. And then when they were finished and he felt like things were okay, that's when Katherine struck.
Oh, God.
So it was the next day when his coworkers were very worried because John never showed up for work. They called and no one answered. I guess neighbors eventually got involved. Police were called. So a bunch of concerned neighbors gathered around the house until the police showed up. The police had to break through the back because nobody answered. And what they discovered when they entered the home was something straight out of the most fucked up horror movie ever made. Ugh. So 2 detectives, and I listened to like a number of them talking about this. So 2 detectives.
Let's hear it.
2 detectives walked through the home, calling out to John with no answer.
Mm-hmm.
One of them ran into this big curtain thing hanging from the ceiling, but oddly, when he touched it, it was cold. And then he noticed that he had blood all over his arms. And then he realized this was not a curtain. This was an entire human pelt hanging from a butcher's hook. He had just run into John's.
How did he not notice that? But
skin in his entirety. Because you don't expect like it's like you don't expect that like somebody's just been skinned. Like literally,
for sure.
He was just skinned head to toe.
That's fucked. That is like, horror movie. Yeah.
Content warning here, guys, is super fucking gruesome. So like it's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's shocking.
Yeah.
You see like his entire head of hair.
Wait, do you have photos of this?
No, there's no photos.
Yeah, I was gonna say
this. There's just the testimony. You like his entire face, his whole body. One of them was like, I could see like his pubic hair, like a patch of that.
Right.
Walking further into the home, they found the rest of John's headless, skinless, and penisless corpse cross-legged in the living room.
Oh my God, she put it cross-legged?
She sat him up with no head and no skin and no penis. Ugh. And you can tell now, but there's also chunks of his butt missing. His body had been stabbed 37 times, and his skin had been meticulously removed with great skill. Everything from his face, his hair, to his toes remained completely intact. There was 1 square inch of skin that was left on John's body. And in that square was the scar from where Katherine had stabbed him. So
she's fucking crazy.
Very like obviously left there.
Yeah.
There was blah, 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 yeah. They found John's head in a big pot on the kitchen stove. It had been boiled.
Of course it had.
And the table had been set with 2 full meals and the names, 2 like name tags of 2 of the 3 of John's children next to each plate. On the plates were cooked bits of human meat, which they later learned was butt meat. And it was
But meat.
accompanied by yellow squash, pumpkin, zucchini, cabbage, and gravy.
Wow, thanks, Catherine. Thanks for the thoughtful meal.
Like horrific.
That's so scary. Did she actually feed it to them, or she just set it up that way?
No, she set it up that way. I think.
Thank God.
And I don't. So the whole question in my head is like, I have not seen a single instance or anyone saying that like she actually ate him.
Right.
It's very clear. Like the kids would have come home, seen the corpse, and not eaten the meals. Right. Like there's no way
did the kids see it?
No, they did not come home to that.
They would never fucking recover. Yeah.
God, can you imagine?
No.
They also found chunks of the butt meat like thrown out in the backyard.
Right.
But I'm saying there's no evidence to my knowledge that she ate him.
Right.
I think it seems likely that she might have tried to eat him, but there's another theory. Like you'll see later on. I think this was all like quite performative.
Right.
But anyway. That's why I don't know that you can call her a cannibal. A lot of people call her a cannibal. Clearly, this has cannibal-like traits.
Yeah.
And I think it's very possible that she like tried.
It's hard to say, especially if they didn't notice. Because in a lot of the cases of cannibalism, it'll be known because certain parts of the body were never recovered. But it sounds like all the pieces were there.
Yeah,
they're dismembered.
I couldn't see anything that was missing.
Right.
But like she made gravy, so like I don't fucking know.
Oh God.
Yeah, but so she had it all laid out, and there was a note. And it was, she's barely literate, so it's like really hard to understand. But it said,
I see the note. Also, the fact that she made fucking name cards,
and only 2 of the 3 kids. One kid she just doesn't even mention.
Weird.
And the note says, "Time got you back, Jonathan." His name is Jonathan, for rapping, which I think
Jonathan is
raping.
hard to spell. Oh, rapping, yep.
Yeah, and maybe it's spelled Jonathan. I don't know. I've just never seen Jonathan spelt with an O versus an A. So it says, "Time you got back, Jonathan, for rapping," which I believe she meant raping, "my daughter," which I think she means daughter.
Yep.
You to Beck. Beck was one of the daughters of John Price.
Okay.
You to Beck for Ross, for Little John. This is his other son. Now play with Little John's dick, John Price. So don't know. This seems to be accusations of rape and stuff, and the accusations in their note were found to be completely groundless. But it's also really difficult to understand, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So anyway, they go through the place. There's blood splatter and bloody handprints and streaks all over the walls. Like the place is covered in blood. Clearly, this is going to cause a mess.
Yeah.
They found a blood trail on the ground and the walls leading up to the front door. They figured that what happened was that John, like she stabbed him a bunch of times in the room, and he actually made it to the front door and almost escaped, but he was too weak and she pulled him back in. She finished the job.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. They went upstairs and they found Catherine passed out cold on her bed. It looked like she'd taken a bunch of there's empty pill bottles and attempted to kill herself.
Did she know?
Catherine,
how many did she take? Do we know?
Just like entire bottles. Like,
right.
I don't know even what the pills were.
Okay.
I think a lot of people theorize that she wasn't really trying to kill herself.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
We can't really know. I don't know. There's a lot of alleged, she claimed to like almost kill herself a number of times.
Yeah.
I don't know. So she's whisked off to the hospital. The police had the horrible task of notifying John's family and telling them how they found him. Unfortunately, they didn't get to one of the daughters before she learned the details from the news, which sucks.
Yeah.
Catherine woke up in the hospital and claimed she had no memory of what happened. She did talk about the recent incident where she stabbed John. Many seasoned investigators who were involved in this case suffered and still probably do from very serious trauma as a result of seeing and processing the crime scene.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them be interviewed, and it's like these like grown burly ass men, and they're just like, I can't even close my eyes. Like it's just finding the skin and finding the head in that had literally been cooked.
Yeah.
It's
Ooh.
like, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. You're just like waking up, oh, it's time to do my job as a detective.
Right.
Like, what am I going to do today? And then you just enter this home thinking like, oh, maybe I'm going to see a violent incident. Or maybe I'm going to see somebody like maybe even dead.
Right.
You just don't expect to see somebody's entire skinless body and then all the skin just like that's just, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
It was obviously super gruesome. They played the video of like walking through the crime scene at trial. It was nothing short of traumatizing for anybody who saw it.
Yeah.
I think that, where was I seeing this? Okay. Yeah, that's what happened. So one of John Price's solicitors found evidence that Katherine had taken money out of John's bank account, around $1,000, which he used as proof to say that she was of sound mind at the time. Like, clearly, like, things were very premeditated.
Yeah.
Also, her own brother told the police, and mind you, this is one of the brothers probably who was raping her through her entire childhood, but
yeah,
told the police that Katherine had told him that she was going to murder John, but do it in such a horrific way that it would make her look crazy so that she could plead insanity. This was 3 weeks before the murder. So Katherine initially tried to plead guilty to manslaughter, a laughable thing.
Yeah.
And absolutely nobody was having that. So
seriously.
Yeah. So I'd be like,
you skinned him. Like,
that
no.
is not manslaughter. So arrangements for a trial began. During jury selection, prospective juror members were given the option to drop out due to the disturbing nature of the case. Very much
Fair.
like the Homolka, the Paul Bernardo, Carla Homolka case. I'm sure with a lot of these like really gruesome ones, like you can't just be like, you have to watch this.
Yeah.
But only 5 out of 60 took the offer.
I know. Would you?
It's surprising. No.
Would you drop out?
No,
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, sick, like an interesting case.
I know.
I don't think I'd be in the majority, so that's fair enough. Although the majority of people did not take the offer, so I find that really interesting. But only one day into jury selection, Katherine changed her plea to guilty. After a psychiatric assessment determined that Knight understood the consequences of her guilty plea, that went through. So they didn't have to do a trial, but they did have a sentencing hearing. And during that, Katherine's lawyers requested that she be excused from participating in order to avoid hearing some of the facts of the case.
Well, and she knows the facts of the case.
Yeah, because she did it. So that's just like, excuse me. The judge was like, no. And during the hearing, when Dr. Timothy Lyons took the stand and talked about the skinning and decapitation of John Price, Katherine became hysterical and had to be sedated.
Oh, stop it, Katherine.
Yeah, it's like, sit down. Like, fuck.
Yeah, like the least you could do is just sit through this and like take your punishment.
Yeah, it's not even like, I think the worst part about being like a murderer or whatever and like having to go through the trial is like the victim impact statements at the end. But this wasn't even that. This was just somebody saying what she did.
Right.
On November 8th, 2001, Justice O'Keefe stated that due to the nature of these crimes and Katherine's lack of remorse, he felt the case warranted a severe penalty. So he sentenced her to life in prison and wouldn't fix a non-parole period, and also demanded her papers be marked, quote, never to be released.
Good.
This was the harshest punishment that a woman has ever received in Australian history. Which
I mean
is what makes this case like super famous.
Right.
During the sentencing, the judge was quoted as saying, quote, the last minutes of his, meaning John Price's, life must have been a time of abject terror for him, as they were a time of utter enjoyment for her. She has not expressed any contrition or remorse, and if released, she poses a serious threat to the security of society. End quote.
Yeah, like this, she doesn't know how to have remorse.
Yes, this is absolutely no question an example of somebody who is a threat to themselves and everybody around them. Absolutely. And I don't know how you even begin to rehabilitate a person like this. This is just a person, unfortunately, I think it's like, you just got to lock them up. You just got to be like, get this person away from innocent people.
It's sad too, because it's like she never stood a chance with her upbringing.
Absolutely. It's terrible. It's because it's like, this is like how humans work. If you treat them poorly and treat them like shit when they're kids, like, they're not going to turn out well. Mind you, most of them don't turn out to be like meticulously skin and behead somebody. That's very, very extreme. But
but also not that many people I mean, I don't know, but not that many people probably go through the level of like abuse that she did, right?
Yeah, it was extreme and it was constant. And then in her adult life, like, she never really received proper like punishment, or it's not even like punishment, but it's like her behaviors were never addressed. They were just
like nobody ever checked her for it.
They were just allowed to fester and like just get so
like she went to the mental hospital, but it doesn't sound like there was any type of long-term treatment. So
this is a prime example of why mental health services are so important, and like how they can literally save lives,
right?
If there was like proper things in place, and which I know is like it's a very hard thing to do, because you can't force people. Like, we've decided as a society, you can't force people into being like institutionalized unless they are truly a threat. And I mean, she seemed like she was truly a threat, but it's hard to again prove that somebody's a threat, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can't make people do stuff, there's gonna always be, and I don't think you should necessarily make people, like, that's a very big debate, I guess, in life or whatever.
Right.
But if you're not going to be able to force people to do things, there will always be a percentage of people who are violent and who, just for whatever reason it is, are a threat to other people and are going to hurt people. Yeah. And it's just,
she is definitely one of those people.
That's just why life is not fair. Like, and there's nothing you can do about it. It'd be nice if you could, but I just don't think it's possible. Not in a free society anyway. In 2006, Katherine tried to appeal the life sentence, claiming that it was too harsh for the crime. LOL.
Stop it.
Justice McClellan wrote in his judgment, quote, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond..."
Quote, "Fuck no."
Yeah, basically. He said this was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society, and promptly denied the appeal. And Katherine remains in prison to this day. The end. That's it.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's the story of Katherine Knight. And I just find it such an it's a really interesting like case study into child abuse, into like unchecked borderline personality disorder, and I'm sure in its most extreme form. I think like everything else, there's probably a spectrum of like,
for sure,
borderline personalities that can, still survive in society and whatever. But this is like very unchecked, extreme, and
what's kind of random that I wonder is if she had been like 5 feet tall, would any of this have happened? Yeah,
if she was just like a smaller, more vulnerable woman, would her like physical attacks like I'm sure it would be much easier for a lot of these men to like disarm her or just like
overpower her. Whatever.
I feel like
'cause 6 foot tall, it's like not that many men are going to be taller than you, and if they are, it's by a little bit.
And most of the men she was with, and you'll see pictures when
they were shorter.
They were smaller than her. She specifically chose men who were more vulnerable.
Right.
And I think that was probably a conscious choice.
I understand why she would do that, since she spent her whole life being preyed upon, or her whole childhood, her formative years being preyed upon by men. So
and being taught
kind of makes sense.
And being taught that men are predators by her mother.
Right.
Her mother taught her that all men care about is sex.
I mean, everybody taught her that.
Yeah. But like very explicitly from her mother.
Right.
She was like went into such graphic detail about that.
Is her mom still around? Her mom's
I'm not sure. She'd be
I wonder
really
like
old
if they have
by then.
I wonder if they like had a relationship at the end of all of this.
Apparently one of her brothers is in prison, maybe more than one. Like
I feel like they should all be in prison at this point.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing well.
Fuck, that's so sad.
Hopefully her kids are doing okay. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I'm sure they're better off than,
I'm sure they're better off that she's where she is now.
Yeah.
It's and like John John Price, I saw 2 of his kids in an interview, and they seem like regular, well-adjusted kids.
That's good.
And they seem like one of them, the one who she left out, who like she didn't make the name tag for. And there was also, by the way, there was also a photograph of the kids, and she like stabbed the 2 kids, but not the other one.
Nothing. That's creepy. A stabbed photograph. That's creepy.
Yeah, it was super creepy. And
do you have photos of that?
No, all I have photos of, there's one photo of like a hallway that's just like covered in blood.
Ugh.
And not much else. I think I saw a photo of the note somewhere, but then I like after I was looking, I couldn't find it.
The note is just so badly written, though.
I know, it's just useless. There's so many times where I'm researching something and I find a photo and I'm like, oh, that's a cool photo, and then I like move on and I don't save it. Yeah. And then later I can't find it.
I know, that happens to me too.
Yeah, it's really annoying. But yeah, there's very little that came out to the public, I think, because it was like far too graphic and like far too disturbing. It's like all the really good stuff never gets let out. I don't even know if I'd want to see it. No, I'd see it. I would. I'd look.
Yeah, me too.
But I'd probably semi-regret it, but I'd do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I would for sure, but it would be really bad.
Yeah. But I don't remember what I was saying before, but yeah, it's just very interesting case study. And the daughter, the other daughter, the one who's not mentioned in the note, she was like, for some reason, I can't, like, I'm not upset with, like, she didn't say she forgives her, but she's like, I can't be mad at her. She's in prison. Like, she's getting what she deserves. Like, she seems like her nature is like a very forgiving nature or something. And I'm curious as to like, if she had a good relationship with Katherine or something.
Probably. Yeah.
Why she left her out of the,
I would think so, yeah.
Why she didn't make her a plate of her father.
God.
But yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
She's more fucked up than Carla. I think we can say that. Oh,
yeah, for sure. For sure. Because this is, I mean, it's the influence of her childhood that's caused this, but it's like, with that childhood, she would have gone on and done something like this. There's no way. There's no way she would have gotten further and not done something like this. She was
for sure
mentally ill. I think that's a huge part of it.
Agreed.
She just like had a really violent nature. And you could even see like with the first David, like he's already telling so many people like, watch out, she's gonna kill you.
Yeah. That's a scary person to be around.
It's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, like, all these people in all these different relationships and their kids and stuff, like,
yeah,
they're just like living in constant fear of their lives, for their lives.
And it's probably so taboo for men to talk about being abused. Like, it sounds like it even is for women, and it is, like, even in this day and age, but
even especially
at that time, even more so.
Yeah, especially in this time in like rural community, like this is not like the progressive downtown Toronto that I live in, that like, you know, men can talk about their feelings. These are miners and slaughterhouse workers and farmers. Like, these are not guys who like it's shocking to me even that John was like telling people that he was scared that he was going to die. Like, that's how you knew that it was really bad, and
he
people
was
were
truly
actually
scared,
worried, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be scared too. So
what do you think about this rating wise?
I'd put it at like a 7, probably. The skinning really takes it to the next level. And like the kids finding out. I mean, the worst would be if she like did this in front of the kids in any way. I feel like that would just be like,
that would make it like a 10. That's like torture.
Yeah,
that's torturing him. I mean, he's already dead, but the
like, kids, yeah.
I think mutilating a dead body is such a like horrible. Like, it's obviously worse to torture somebody while they're alive. Obviously, I think anyone would be like, I'd much rather you mutilate my dead body than my alive body. Right. But mutilating a dead body,
she pretty much tortured him while he was alive anyway.
Yeah, she stabbed him a lot of times.
And like mentally tortured him. So
yes. What was I gonna say? Mutilating it. There's something so wrong about mutilating a dead body, or like having sex with a dead body, which I don't think she did, but it's so against. It's just like, remember we were talking about rape recently, about like, why is it so much worse to like physical sexual abuse versus physical violent abuse? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just like, it's a violating thing to be.
It really is. Yeah.
So I don't know. That scares me.
Everything about that scares me.
And yeah, I think also like it's just really important to talk about the reality that like men can be abused too. Men can be physically abused, and it should be taken seriously.
Yeah, definitely.
All domestic abuse is horrifying. But I think men a lot of the time are probably more afraid to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I don't know if it's truly less common or not, but
yeah, I don't know. It's definitely yeah, I don't know what the stats are, but I think even if it is like a 50-50 thing, probably domestic abuse towards women is like more highly reported and like people care about it more. Probably a lot of men have been in physically abusive relationships and haven't said anything about it or just like dealt with it.
Yeah, like people don't take them seriously.
Yeah, and like even like
or even they like, don't take
it. Even they don't maybe take it seriously. It could just it's just we don't recognize it as much as actual abuse.
Right.
So that's that.
Wow.
We'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts about that horrible story.
Yeah, let us know what you think. We are diversifying. Female killers are being talked about.
Yeah. It's the ladies can be violent.
Yep.
And there's actually there's a lot of female killers. I have a couple in my list. So yeah, reach out to us on Twitter or not Twitter. Well, we have a Twitter. We'll set that up soon. One day. Yeah. One day we will do that. Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast. Email us. We've been getting a couple emails, some nice, some not so nice. Hello at Who's Knocking Podcast.com. We are on Apple, Spotify. We are on YouTube. There will be a couple of visuals here. Some cases have more visuals than others. And we'd love to see you here on YouTube. You can see our faces. That's pretty much all. We would love any sort of rating or what are they called? Reviews. Spotify, you can rate on Spotify now. I don't know if you can review.
Oh, really?
You can give a rating if you so choose.
Yeah, go ahead.
It'd be nice. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video or podcast and listening to us go on. And please stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
Goodbye. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.